Welcome. So today we are going to kick off our self-compassion discussion with this quote by Dr. Kristin Neff. Instead of mercilessly judging and criticizing yourself for various inadequacies or shortcomings, self-compassion means you are kind and understanding when confronted with personal failings. After all, whoever said you were supposed to be perfect? So fundamentally, that's what mindfulness and self-compassion are about. So we're going to cover these three elements, which is mindfulness, self-kindness, and connectedness. We're going to talk about each one and how they work. So the three components that she has identified through research, I think it's important to note that Dr. Kristin Neff has done this through research, is the self-kindness versus self-judgment, common humanity versus kind of like self-isolation, and mindfulness versus over-identification. So self-kindness. What is self-kindness? Fundamentally, it's an opportunity to treat yourself nicely. There's a great quote where she talks about treating yourself like a good coach who's kind and understanding instead of with harsh criticism. And that's what self-kindness is being warm and understanding to ourselves when we fail or when we feel inadequate. Recognize that being imperfect and experiencing difficulties is inevitable. And then to have a tendency to be gentle with ourselves when confronted with a painful experience. So self-kindness is actively soothing and comforting yourself and being proactive in the words that you use with yourself. Common humanity is really about recognizing that suffering is part of the shared human experience. It's not something that we all go through, or it's something that we all go through and that we are not alone. Fundamentally, the very definition of being human means that one is mortal, vulnerable, and imperfect. So if you can pause and see kind of your own experience as part of a larger human experience and recognize life is imperfect. There is a lot of sayings and cliches that go with this. One of them that often comes to mind during this conversation is misery loves company, which is really not about like bringing somebody down to be with you in misery, but rather knowing that you're not alone and other people have failed and feel inadequate and have suffered. And then the last part that ties these three together is the mindfulness part. And this allows us to kind of sit and be with these painful feelings and avoiding like suppressing or running away from these feelings. So when it comes to self-compassion, it's a balanced approach to our negative emotions so that our feelings are neither suppressed or exaggerated. It's also a willingness to observe our negative thoughts and our emotions. And it's an opportunity to try and observe and notice with a non-judgmental state of mind. And I know that we've heard that phrase multiple times, but that's the key part, is non-judgmental. So the research with self-compassion is actually pretty deep. There's about pages and pages, like I would say a couple hundred different types of research papers on this right now. But I'll just go through a couple of the key ones. First is that self-compassion is linked to coping and resilience. And so what that can look like is that individuals are more effective with coping with divorce, chronic pain. They are less likely to develop PTSD after combat. Self-compassion is linked to motivation, which is often intrinsic, the internal motivation to learn and to grow, keeping personal standards high, a greater perceived competence, and a less of a fear of failure. Linked to personal accountability, which often means taking greater responsibility for your past mistakes. You're more likely to apologize. You're more likely to have positive health behaviors, more likely to exercise, quit smoking, use less alcohol. So that's what personal accountability kind of was focused on. Self-compassion is linked to other focused concerns, meaning you are focused on others and caring about others. You have improved romantic relationships. You are more likely to forgive and take different perspectives. And probably not surprisingly, self-compassion is linked to increased compassion, empathy, and altruism. However, I just want to pause and just kind of explain what self-compassion is not. Self-compassion is not self-pity. It's not feeling sorry for yourself. It's more like an antidote to self-pity and our tendency to whine about our bad luck. It is not a weakness. Self-compassion is really a powerful source of coping. Research shows that people with high self-compassion are much better able to deal with difficult situations. Again, it's not self-indulgence. Research shows self-compassionate people engage in healthier behaviors like exercising, eating well, drinking less, and going to the doctor more regularly. So you're not indulging in yourself. You are actually taking better care of yourself. Self-compassion is not making excuses for bad behavior. It's research shows that self-compassionate people take greater personal responsibility. And like I said in the previous slide, they are more likely to apologize if they've offended someone. Self-compassion will not reduce your motivation. It doesn't make you complacent. People sometimes think self-criticism will help motivate them, but it oftentimes leads to a fear of failure. And then self-compassion helps motivate without beating ourselves up. So kind of going back to that positive coach. One way that a lot of people describe self-compassion is the airplane analogy, is that when the steward or stewardess talks about, like, in the event of emergency, put your mask on first and then help others. So oftentimes that analogy helps people say, like, okay, I do need to talk to myself nicer. I do need to care for myself nicer or more, and take care of myself before I can take care of others. So we're going to pause and we're going to do an activity. So for this, I recommend you just get a sheet of paper. We're going to fold it 3 times horizontally. So we have 3 rows. If you made 3 columns, turn it the other way. So feel free to pause this to go through the activity too. In row 1, think of people in your life. Identify someone with whom it's easy to spend time and write them a compliment. Write something that you think, but maybe you haven't shared with them before. So this is someone with you're close. Now, in row 2, identify someone with maybe you're not very close. Maybe you tend to struggle to get along with them, or you find yourself judging them, and write a compliment to them. Something that you think but haven't shared with them before. And now in row 3, write a compliment to yourself. And after you've written these 3 rows, take a minute to reflect. Which was the hardest compliment to write? Was it easier to find something nice to say about others or yourself? And then just kind of reflect, like, what does this mean for your mindset? I do this a lot in in-person classes and in workshops, and a lot of people end up saying, like, wow, it is easier for me to write something nice about someone with whom I don't really respect or I judge a lot than it is to write something about myself. And that is fundamentally self-compassion. How can you talk to yourself in the way that maybe you would talk to the friend in that first scenario? So we're going to talk a little bit about other activities. So on Canvas, there are a few of these. Self-compassion breaks, which is a guided meditation where you would take a break and have self-compassion. There are self-affirmations, self-compassion writing, how would you talk to a child, and then name your self-critic. So naming your self-critic would be Cheryl or Karen or, for me, because I'm a female. So I would say, like, God, Cheryl is on me today and she just doesn't have anything nice to say. So I'm kind of separating it from my inner self-talk. The one right above it is how would you talk to a child? And that actually fundamentally has helped my internal negative self-talk. So when my daughter was young, it was just her and I, and it was hard, right? Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was raising a kid by myself, and I had a lot of self-doubt. And at some point, I'm not sure who said it to me. It might have been a parent, but it could have been anybody, but it was important. Someone said to me, like, wow, would you ever talk to your daughter that way? And I paused and I was like, what way? And they were like, the way that you talk to yourself and the things that you say to yourself. Would you ever talk to your child that way? And that was a huge aha moment for me. I would never want my daughter to talk to herself the way that I found myself talking to myself in the past. Like, some of the things I said were really hurtful and unkind. And I wouldn't ever say that to my daughter because I love her. However, I was very willing to speak to myself that way. Maybe not out loud, but it was definitely in my head. And it was a huge eye opener for me. And it fundamentally changed how I talk to myself. And if I catch myself in a negative self talk, it's a great reminder to say, I would never talk to my daughter this way. So why would I talk to myself that way? So that's one kind of way to incorporate self-compassion, is trying to reframe over and over again. However, there's other ways to do it that are maybe more formal. So you can have a daily mantra or a daily affirmations, and this could be something that you gravitate to. Mantra is often used and synonymous with Sanskrit terminology, but it doesn't have to be. So let's just say you're going through something really hard and difficult, and the mantra that you use is patience and self-compassion. Have patience with yourself, have compassion for yourself. And anytime, whether you're exercising or whether you're in a difficult conversation or you're just struggling to wait in line without crying at the bank, you have something silent you can gravitate towards. Daily intentions can be used the same way. Of what are your intentions for self-compassion today? Challenging your thoughts is another one. There's in cognitive behavior therapy, they often use challenging your thoughts, where you kind of chronicle that inner voice and then challenge it. So if you have an inner voice that says, gosh, I'm such a loser, then you write that down and then you're like, are you though? And you challenge all these times that you weren't a loser. An anchoring activity. This can simply be you use those daily mantras or affirmations with a specific habit that you already have that's ongoing. So for example, if you journal every morning, you could add in a self-compassion journaling to that. And then you can use self-compassion within meditation. So there are 2 different meditations on Canvas. One is just a general guided meditation, and the second one is how to use mala bead meditations. And so I will have a separate video on how to use mala beads in conjunction with self-compassion. So that about wraps it up. It's pretty short and pretty simple. There are 2 pages of resources though, so if you are interested in those, you can have them. And again, everything will be on Canvas, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions about this.